I collided with the greatest truth of my life on the day a chapter from my past, one I believed was long dead, stood alive at my doorstep again. I never imagined that an accident, a betrayal, a slap, and then a secret return, would completely change my entire world. Hello. My name is Ariana Carter, and if there is one truth I learned too early in life, it is that privilege does not protect you from pain. Sometimes it only delays it long enough to hurt even more when it finally arrives. I was born into comfort, into a home where everything felt warm and full. My father, Robert Carter, was the kind of man whose presence filled every room with certainty. He was successful, respected, and endlessly generous, not just with his wealth, but with his love. For him, I wasn't just a daughter. I was his little shadow, his pride, the one whose future he planned with careful, hopeful hands. Some of my earliest memories are woven around him: his deep laugh, the way he lifted me into his arms as if I weighed nothing, the way he always stopped whatever he was doing when I entered the room. He used to say, "Ariana, the world will try to make you small someday. Don't ever let it." Back then, I didn't understand what he meant. I just smiled and hugged him, feeling invincible in the protection of his love. We lived in a large white house overlooking the hills, with a driveway long enough for me to learn to ride my bike. Money was never a problem. I went to the best schools, wore the prettiest dresses, and traveled every summer. People often whispered that I was lucky. And I was. But luck has a way of slipping through your fingers when you least expect it. The year I turned 14, everything changed. It was a rainy evening. My father had gone out for a business meeting, something he did countless times before. But that night, he didn't come back. I remember the sound of the phone ringing, the tremor in my mother's voice as she picked it up, the way her knees buckled before she even spoke. I didn't hear the words, but I felt them. Some truths don't need translation. There had been an accident. A truck lost control on the highway. My father's car was crushed. They tried to save him, they said. But fate had already made its decision long before the ambulance arrived. I remember running outside into the rain, screaming his name as if the sky might give him back if I cried hard enough. But the world remained silent, the way it always does when it owes you nothing. Overnight, the warm glow of our home dimmed. Rooms felt emptier, laughter vanished, and the air carried a heaviness that settled into every corner. People kept saying, "He lived a good life," or "He's in a better place," but none of those words touched the hollow ache inside my chest. I didn't want him in a better place. I wanted him here, beside me, telling me that everything would be okay. My mother fell apart quietly, holding herself together only for my sake. But children feel everything. I saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the fear of raising a family alone, the weight of responsibilities she never expected to carry. She tried to shield me from the chaos, but sorrow has a way of slipping through cracks. And then came the responsibilities. Legal processes, financial reorganizing, relatives visiting with forced condolences, people whispering about the Carter Empire and what would happen to it. I was suddenly expected to grow up, because life no longer cared how young I was. Losing my father didn't make me stronger at first. It made me quieter, reserved, different. The world outside continued as if nothing had happened, but everything inside me was rearranged. Nights were the worst. I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every memory. His smile, his scent, his voice calling me pumpkin. Each memory felt like a thread unraveling inside me. Over time, I learned to walk with the weight of his absence. Not because it got easier, but because I had no choice. My mother needed help, and I became the silent strength of our small family. Bills, appointments, school. I began carrying pieces of a world too big for someone my age. People say time heals everything. But time doesn't heal. It simply teaches you how to hide the pain where others can't see it. Years passed, routines settled, and slowly life began stitching itself together again. But there was always a part of me that felt unfinished, as if the story of my father had ended too abruptly, with too many unanswered questions. I kept his watch in my drawer, his last birthday card under my pillow, and his voice preserved only in memory. It was the only way I knew to keep him close. I didn't know then that life wasn't done with me. I didn't know that the accident I mourned so deeply carried a truth I was never told. I didn't know that the story of my father, my hero, was not over. But back then, all I understood was this. The day my father died was the day my world collapsed. And the day I unknowingly began the long, painful journey toward becoming the woman I would need to be for the storms still ahead. When I look back now, I often wonder how I didn't see it coming, how I missed the signs, the red flags fluttering right in front of me. Maybe I was young. Maybe I was lonely. Maybe losing my father had carved out a hole inside me, and Marcus simply knew how to fill it long enough for me to trust him. I met Marcus Reed during my early 20s, at a charity event my mother had persuaded me to attend. He was charming in the way people with polished smiles often are, just enough confidence to be impressive, just enough mystery to be intriguing. He laughed at my jokes, remembered the smallest details I mentioned in passing, and treated me with a gentleness I didn't realize I was craving. For the first time since my father's death, I felt seen. And maybe that was the problem. Our relationship moved quickly, too quickly. Within months, we were inseparable. He would bring flowers, surprise me with dinners, make me feel as if I were the center of his world. My mother adored him. Our friends called us a perfect match. And I let myself believe it. So when he proposed, I said yes without hesitation. I thought I was building a new chapter. I didn't know I was walking into a cage. The shift didn't happen overnight. It was slow, like poison slipping into a river, unnoticed until everything is contaminated. The first argument we had was over something small. I don't even remember what started it. But I remember the way his voice changed, cold, sharp, mocking. "You're overreacting, Ariana. You always do." I brushed it off, told myself every couple fights. But seeds were being planted. Then came the comments about my clothes. "Are you really going to wear that? It makes you look cheap." Then the comments about my spending. "You don't need to buy that. You act like money grows on trees." Then about my friends. "I don't like you talking to Lily so much. She's a bad influence." Each remark was a thread pulling at who I was. Each criticism chipped away at my confidence. And Marcus? He knew exactly what he was doing. By the time we got married, the man I fell in love with only appeared when he wanted something. The rest of the time, he controlled everything: how I dressed, how I spoke, how I behaved at gatherings. He didn't yell. He didn't hit. His cruelty was quieter, strategic, cutting, precise. If I forgot to check in while shopping, he'd say, "You made me worry. You never think about anyone but yourself." If dinner wasn't perfect, he'd sigh and push the plate away. "Is this the best you can do?" If I wanted to visit my mother, he'd frown. "She makes you weak. Stay home." Slowly, I stopped arguing. I stopped explaining. I stopped expecting kindness. Silence became my shield. I learned to measure my words, to avoid anything that might trigger his irritation. I learned to walk carefully around him, as if my marriage were a minefield and one wrong step would blow everything apart. And yet, every time he hurt me, he would come back hours later with that same polished smile and say, "I didn't mean it. You know I love you." And I, foolishly hopeful, would nod. Because that is the thing about emotional abuse. It doesn't destroy you all at once. It erases pieces of you slowly, quietly, until you look in the mirror and don't recognize the person staring back. I stopped seeing my friends. Stopped visiting family. Stopped talking about my dreams. Marcus didn't forbid these things directly. He simply made silence easier than conflict. The financial control came next. Even though my father had left money for me, Marcus insisted. Let me handle everything. I'm the man of the house. I agreed. Not because I trusted him, but because I didn't want another argument. My world shrank to the size of our home. His rules, his moods, his expectations. I felt like a guest in my own life, tiptoeing through days that all looked the same. I would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling the same way I did when I lost my father, wondering how I ended up here again. Grieving someone who wasn't dead, grieving a version of myself I couldn't get back. But I stayed. I stayed because I thought I could fix it. I stayed because I believed marriages went through phases. I stayed because I didn't know how to leave. The day I realized how deep I had sunk was the day I tried to wear a dress my father had bought me years ago, a soft blue one I loved. I put it on, looked in the mirror, and smiled faintly at the memory it carried. When Marcus saw me, he didn't even pause. That dress makes you look desperate. Change it. Just like that. A single sentence. A single bullet to a memory I cherished. I turned away before he could see the tears in my eyes. He didn't ask why I left the room. He didn't care. By then, the poison had spread everywhere inside me. But life has a strange way of waking you up. Not with comfort, but with disaster. And the day of the mall incident, the day everything shattered, was coming faster than I ever realized. There are moments in life that split your timeline into a before and an after. For me, that moment happened under the bright, artificial lights of a shopping mall. A place meant for laughter, families, and weekend outings. Not for humiliation so deep it would carve itself into my memory forever. It began as an ordinary Saturday. I woke up determined, almost desperate, to make the day feel normal. For weeks, Marcus had been drifting further away from me, offering only cold glances, clipped words, and that suffocating air of superiority he wore like a second skin. I told myself that maybe, just maybe, if we spent time together outside the house, things would soften. Let's go to the mall today, I suggested hesitantly over breakfast. He looked up from his phone, barely acknowledging me. Why? I swallowed my embarrassment. We haven't gone out together in a while. Maybe we could have lunch, walk around a bit. He sighed, annoyed even by my hope. But after a moment, he nodded. Fine. Get ready. That single word, fine, felt like approval. I didn't know it would become permission for destruction. I dressed carefully, choosing something simple but nice, hoping to avoid criticism. The mall was busy that day. Kids tugging at parents, teenagers laughing, couples holding hands. For a few minutes, walking beside Marcus, I pretended we belonged among them. Do you want to look at the new store? I asked softly, but he wasn't listening. He kept checking his phone, typing quickly, glancing around as if searching for someone. We had barely taken 10 steps inside when he stopped abruptly. I need to check something. Wait here. I blinked. Here? Marcus, I thought we were. Just stay, he snapped. Don't wander off. Before I could respond, he walked away, fast, disappearing into the crowd. I stood alone by the fountain, hugging my purse, trying to ignore the sinking feeling in my stomach. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Then 20. I texted him. No reply. I called. No answer. Something wasn't right. Determined not to be abandoned like a child, I walked through the mall searching for him. And then, I saw him. Marcus was standing inside a high-end boutique, laughing, as he held up an expensive red dress against another woman's body. She was beautiful. younger than me. Confident in a way I hadn't felt in years. Her name, I would later learn, was Vanessa Hill. She touched his arm playfully. He didn't pull away. He smiled, wide and warm, the kind of smile I hadn't seen in months. My heart slammed against my ribs. My vision blurred. But I forced my legs to move. I stepped into the store, my voice trembling. "Marcus." He turned. For a brief second, guilt flashed in his eyes. Then it hardened. "Ariana, what are you doing here?" "What am I doing here?" My voice cracked. "You were supposed to be with me. You left me alone." Vanessa leaned closer to him, smirking. "Is this her?" My breath caught. "Her? Marcus, what is happening?" He rolled his eyes. "Don't make a scene." "Don't make a scene?" I repeated, stunned. "You brought her here? With me?" People were already starting to look. Murmuring. Whispering. I felt the room tightening around me, but I needed answers. "Who is she?" I demanded. "She's someone who knows how to behave," he replied coldly. "Unlike you." The words cut deep. But he wasn't done. In a voice barely above a whisper, I said, "Marcus, please. Let's talk privately." He stepped closer, his face twisted with irritated disgust. "You don't get to tell me what to do." "I'm not telling you," I began. But the sentence never finished. His hand connected with my cheek so violently that the sound echoed across the store. My head snapped to the side, and for a moment, I couldn't hear anything but a ringing in my ears. Gasps broke out around us. Someone dropped a shopping bag. A child asked his mother why the man hit the lady. My cheek burned. My eyes welled up. My throat tightened around a sob I refused to release. And then Marcus said the words I will never forget. "Look at you. Pathetic. You're a poor woman pretending to have class. You have nothing. You are nothing." With each word, he stripped me bare, publicly, mercilessly. Vanessa laughed softly beside him. People stared with pity, shock, judgment. Eyes digging into my deepest shame. I felt exposed, broken, abandoned. Like that 14-year-old girl standing in the rain the night my father died. I steadied myself on the display table, forcing my legs not to collapse. "Marcus," I whispered, "why are you doing this?" "Because you don't belong in my world," he spat. "And you never did." Then he turned his back on me, slipping his arm around Vanessa as if I were a stranger who had interrupted their date. I staggered out of the store, blinking through tears, the crowd parting silently around me. No one intervened. No one helped. No one spoke. I walked down the escalator in a daze, my cheek throbbing, my pride shattered, my marriage lying in ruins at my feet. By the time I reached the parking lot, I was shaking so hard I could barely unlock the car door. Inside, I let myself cry, quietly, painfully, because there was nothing left to hold inside. That day, something inside me died. But I didn't know yet. That something else, something stronger, was quietly beginning to take its place. I didn't know yet that the next week would change everything. That a knock on my door would resurrect a part of my life I thought was gone forever. But in that moment, sitting alone in the car with my heart in pieces, all I knew was this. Marcus had destroyed me. And I had no idea how to begin putting myself back together. A week passed after the mall incident, yet the sting of that slap never left my skin. It felt like the bruise had traveled deeper, past bone, past memory, straight into my soul. I kept replaying the moment in my mind, Marcus's expression, the coldness in his eyes, the way he chose another woman over me as easily as someone picking a different shirt from a closet. Every night I would stand in front of the bathroom mirror, touching the place where his hand had landed. The physical mark had faded, but the emotional wound pulsed like a heartbeat under my skin. I didn't tell anyone. Not my mother. Not Lily. Not a single soul. I moved through the days quietly, like a ghost in my own life. I cooked in silence. I cleaned in silence. I slept in silence. Because speaking meant admitting how completely I had been shattered, and I wasn't ready to face that truth. On the seventh day, a Friday afternoon heavy with clouds, I found myself pacing the living room. Something inside me felt unsettled. Restless. As if the world was holding its breath around me. Then, at exactly 4:12 p.m., I heard it. The deep, smooth hum of an expensive engine pulling into my driveway. I froze. No one visited me anymore. No one drove cars like that in my neighborhood. My heart thudded sharply as I walked toward the window. And there, through the blinds, I saw it. A black luxury sedan, sleek, polished, elegant, its chrome reflecting the dimming sky. It didn't belong here. It didn't belong in my life. Cars like that belong to CEOs, diplomats, ghosts from another world. A man stepped out. Tall. Broad-shouldered. Dressed in a charcoal suit that fit too perfectly. His movements were slow, deliberate, as if he were trying to steady himself. He looked toward my front door with an expression that didn't make sense. Anticipation mixed with fear, hope tangled with guilt. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. There are faces we never forget. No matter how much time passes, no matter how many wounds we accumulate. And even from behind the window, even through the fog of disbelief, I knew that face. My throat tightened. My vision blurred. My hands shook uncontrollably. Because the man standing at my doorstep was someone who could not possibly be alive. My father. Robert Carter. The father whose funeral I had mourned. The father whose grave I had visited. The father whose death had broken me into pieces I never fully gathered again. My knees nearly gave out. I pressed my back against the wall, sliding down slowly as my heart pounded a frantic rhythm. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. Grief plays tricks on the mind. Maybe I was hallucinating, maybe pain was finally driving me insane. But then, a knock. Firm. Steady. Familiar. I forced myself to stand, gripping the doorknob as if it were the only thing anchoring me to reality. The world felt distant, muffled, like I was underwater. And yet, something pulled me forward. A magnetic ache in my chest. A tug from somewhere deeper than memory. I opened the door. And there he was. Alive. Not a dream. Not a ghost. Not a fading memory revived by longing. Alive. His hair was a little grayer, his face more worn, but his eyes, those warm, steady eyes, were exactly the same. The eyes that used to watch over me as I slept. The eyes that used to light up when I entered a room. The eyes I had cried over for years. Ariana, he whispered, his voice cracking at the edges. My pumpkin. I broke. Everything inside me, pain, shock, hope, confusion, rushed up at once. I stumbled forward, and he caught me before I fell, wrapping me in the same strong embrace I thought I had lost forever. I clung to him, sobbing into his chest as he held me like he used to when I was little. He stroked my hair, whispering apologies, whispering my name, whispering words I had ached for all my life. I'm here. I'm home. I'm so sorry. How? I choked out. You died. They told us you died. How are you here? He pulled back, cupping my face gently. Something Marcus had never done without judgment. There was an accident, yes, he said softly. But there was also confusion, misidentification. I woke up in a rural hospital hours away with no ID, no memory for weeks. They assumed my damaged car and the body found nearby were mine. I covered my mouth in shock. When my memory returned, he continued, I tried to find my way back. Financial complications, legal confusion, health issues. It took longer than I wanted. Much longer. But the moment I recovered enough to travel, I came straight to you. His voice broke on the last words. I stared at him, tears streaming freely. Dad, I whispered. You're alive. He nodded, pulling me close again. And I'm never leaving you again. We stood there in the doorway for a long time, two souls stitched back together after years of separation neither of us chose. Inside my house, broken pieces of me began shifting back into place. Not perfectly. Not instantly. But undeniably. For the first time in years. I felt safe. I didn't know then that his return wouldn't just heal me. It would rebuild the life that Marcus had tried so hard to destroy. It would be the beginning of my rise. And the beginning of Marcus's fall. If the day my father reappeared felt like waking from a nightmare, then the days that followed felt like learning to breathe again. Slowly. Carefully. With disbelief fading and warmth returning to places inside me that had been cold for years. For the first time in a long time, I didn't wake up with dread tightening my chest. I didn't brace myself waiting for Marcus's footsteps, or his criticism, or his icy silence. Instead, I woke up to the smell of coffee brewing in my kitchen. My father's old habit, paired with the soft hum of him flipping through newspapers at the table. It was strange, surreal even, to have him back in my home. But it was also the safest I had felt in years. One morning as we sat together, he looked at me the way he used to when I was young. Searching, quietly protective. Ariana, he said gently, tell me everything. Your life. Your marriage. Your heart. What happened to you? For a moment, I couldn't speak. No one had asked me that in years. Not because they didn't care, but because I had built walls so high no one could see over them. I lost myself, Dad, I whispered. Piece by piece. Marcus. He made me feel like I was nothing. My father's jaw tightened. His eyes darkened with a quiet fury, a father's fury. You are my daughter, he said firmly. You are not nothing. You never were. Hearing those words, spoken with conviction, without hesitation, made something inside me crack open. I didn't realize how starved I was for validation, for reassurance, for love that wasn't conditional. He placed his hand over mine. Let me fix this. Let me fix what I failed to protect you from. I shook my head. No, Dad. I don't want you to fix it. I just need help learning how to fix myself. He smiled softly. And I'll help you do exactly that. 2 weeks after he returned, my father gently suggested something that shocked me. Ariana, you need a new place. A place untouched by pain. And untouched by Marcus. I hesitated. Dad, this is my home. Is it? He asked quietly. Or is it a reminder of everything you survived? He was right. Every room in that house carried the ghost of an argument, a humiliation, a moment where my voice had been silenced. I had learned to shrink within those walls. I had learned to fear within them too. So, we went house hunting. Just the two of us. Not for a mansion or a status symbol. My father insisted on something different. You need a house that feels like you, not like expectations, he said. After days of searching, we found it. A beautiful 2-story home with wide windows and a small garden bursting with potential. Light poured into every corner. The air smelled fresh. The walls felt welcoming. This is it, I whispered. My father smiled. Then it's yours. I protested, of course. Dad, I can't let you buy. You're not letting me, he cut in gently. I'm giving my daughter the chance to start again. This isn't charity. This is love. Tears blurred my vision. For once, they weren't from pain. The next step was harder, my career. Years with Marcus had drained not only my spirit but also my financial autonomy. I had put aside dreams, ideas, ambitions. All of them drowned beneath the weight of his disapproval. My father refused to let me stay lost. "What do you want to do?" he asked one morning. I shrugged. "I don't know anymore. I used to have ideas, but—" "Ariana," he interrupted softly, "you still have them. You just stopped believing in them." We talked for hours. He listened, not judging, not steering, just listening. And slowly, the passion I had buried resurfaced. I had always loved interior styling, event coordination, small business creativity. I had a natural talent for transforming spaces, organizing details, and creating beautiful experiences. My father leaned back and smiled. "Then we build something around that." "What?" "A business. Your business." I stared at him, stunned. "Dad, that's too much. I can't." "You can," he said firmly. "You will. And I will invest in you the way I always planned to." He helped me register a small company, hire a designer for branding, set up a website, and find my first few clients. Every step felt like reclaiming a part of myself. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was rebuilding. Healing didn't come quickly. It didn't come quietly either. Some nights I still cried remembering the mall incident. Other nights I remembered the arguments, the criticism, the slow erosion of my self-worth. But every morning, I rose to a life that no longer belonged to him. My father encouraged therapy. "Strong women need support too," he reminded me. I went. I talked. I unlearned the lies I had been fed. Slowly, I started recognizing myself again. Not the broken version Marcus shaped, but the version my father had raised, confident, capable, kind, resilient. I would catch glimpses of her in small moments. The way I held my shoulders straighter. The way I made decisions without fear. The way I smiled, truly smiled again. One day, while organizing decor samples for a client, I suddenly paused. My hands weren't trembling. My mind wasn't clouded. My heart wasn't hurting. For the first time in years, I felt free. And it wasn't because my father returned. It was because I was returning to myself. Little did I know, my rising strength would soon collide with Marcus's downfall. And he would come crawling back to a woman he thought he had destroyed. He had no idea the woman waiting for him now was not the same woman who once trembled under his hand. While I was rebuilding my life piece by piece, something very different was happening in Marcus's world. Something I did not witness directly at first, but came to learn slowly, almost poetically, through whispers, acquaintances, and eventually, through Marcus himself. The universe has a way of balancing things. Sometimes gently, sometimes brutally. In Marcus's case, it was the latter. After the mall incident, he believed he had upgraded. He paraded Vanessa Hill around town as if she were a trophy he deserved, a shinier, prettier, younger alternative to the wife he had humiliated. They were seen in high-end restaurants, luxury stores, and social events I used to attend with him. He thought he had climbed higher. He had no idea he was standing on a trapdoor. Vanessa was everything Marcus admired: glamorous, flirtatious, unpredictable. She lived fast, spent fast, talked fast. To a man like Marcus, hungry for validation, she was intoxicating. They moved in together barely a month after the mall incident. Friends who visited told me the apartment looked more like Vanessa's showroom than a home. Designer bags, expensive shoes, imported wine. All funded by Marcus. At least, that's what he believed. Vanessa had a way of convincing him to hand over credit cards, passwords, even access to his investment accounts. She would pout lightly, kiss him on the cheek, and whisper, "Don't you trust me, baby?" Marcus, blinded by ego and lust, handed her more than trust. He handed her control. The first sign came quietly. His bank called. A suspicious withdrawal. Marcus brushed it off. Vanessa liked spontaneity, he told himself. Then came missed payments. Declined cards. Unexpected charges. He began snapping at Vanessa, asking questions, but she was skilled, too skilled. "Relax," she'd say, rolling her eyes. "You worry too much. That's why Ariana was miserable with you." The mention of my name, my existence, only made him more determined to keep Vanessa happy. He didn't want to lose her the way he believed he had lost me. Irony, of course, had its own plans. Over weeks, Marcus noticed more red flags. Vanessa hiding her phone. Late-night outings. Secretive calls. New jewelry he hadn't bought. Conversations that ended abruptly when he entered the room. But he held on, believing he was still in control. He had no idea he was already drowning. The real blow came on a Wednesday morning. Marcus returned home early from work after being reprimanded for financial discrepancies. His inability to pay a company obligation on time. He walked into the apartment and found drawers open, closets emptied, and the scent of Vanessa's perfume fading like a ghost. In the center of the living room sat a single envelope. Inside it, a short, handwritten note. "Thanks for the fun. You were an easy investment. Vanessa." That was it. No apology. No explanation. Just a cold signature from the woman he believed he had upgraded to. When he checked his accounts, every accessible card was maxed out. His investment app didn't recognize his login. His emergency fund was gone. The rent was overdue. His car had been taken for repossession. Vanessa had drained him dry. Marcus staggered onto the couch, the room spinning. The illusion he had wrapped himself in unraveled completely, leaving nothing but the reality he had ignored. He was alone. Used. Discarded. Just like he had done to me. Marcus had always surrounded himself with people who admired his charm and confidence. Men who envied his lifestyle, women who adored his flirting. But the moment his money disappeared, so did they. Social circles that once welcomed him with open arms now looked past him. Invites stopped coming. Messages were left unread. His loyal friends suddenly became too busy. The painful truth he'd refused to acknowledge finally revealed itself. They had never been his friends. They were Marcus's reflection, drawn to his status, not his soul. There was nothing left for them to gain, so there was no reason for them to stay. Within 2 months, Marcus's life collapsed. His credit score plummeted. Debt collectors began calling. His landlord issued an eviction notice. His office reputation crumbled. His boss demoted him due to instability and poor conduct. His car was seized. His designer clothes were sold off to pay bills. He went from fine dining to instant noodles. From high-end cocktails to tap water. From bragging about promotions to avoiding co-workers in grocery stores. Each echo of humiliation carved deeper into his pride. And the worst part? There was no Vanessa to blame. Only himself. His arrogance. His cruelty. His choices. I learned from a mutual acquaintance that one night Marcus had broken down completely. Sitting alone on the curb outside his nearly empty apartment. He had his head in his hands, repeating the same sentence over and over. "She was the only person who ever loved me, and I destroyed her." Maybe he meant the words. Maybe he didn't. But it didn't matter. By then, the damage was irreversible. He had gambled my loyalty for a fantasy. And ended up losing everything. While I rose higher, stronger, freer. Marcus fell into a life he had built with his own hands. Selfish brick by selfish brick. until the entire structure collapsed on him. Little did he know, his humiliation wasn't over. He would soon show up at my doorstep. Broken, desperate, begging for a woman he thought he could live without. And he would learn the final truth. The woman he had slapped publicly was no longer the woman waiting behind the door. I still remember the knock. It was late evening, the kind of quiet where even the smallest sound echoes. I had just finished reviewing some documents for the new business my father helped me start, and for the first time in years, I felt a sense of genuine stability in my life. My home was peaceful. My future was clear. My heart was healing. Then came the knock, soft at first, then desperate, then frantic. I froze. Something inside me already knew. When I opened the door, Marcus stood there. But he wasn't the Marcus I once knew, the man who walked with arrogance in his shoulders, pride in his eyes, and superiority in his voice. No. That man was gone. In his place stood someone hollow. His clothes were wrinkled. His hair unkempt. His eyes swollen from crying. His hands trembling as if he had been wandering for hours. For a moment, he simply stared at me, as if unsure whether he even deserved to speak. Then the collapse began. "Ariana, please." His voice cracked immediately. I had never heard Marcus sound like that. Small, broken, stripped of all the armor he once wore so confidently. "Please. Don't close the door. I just need to talk." He stepped forward, and instinctively I stepped back. The boundary I had built was firm, unshakable. "What do you want, Marcus?" I kept my voice calm, steady, because I wasn't the same woman he had humiliated in that mall. He swallowed hard, tears spilling uncontrollably. "I messed up. I messed up everything. Vanessa. She took everything. My money, my savings, my car. My friends, they all left. I have nothing. I have no one." He wiped his face with the back of his shaking hand. "I thought she loved me. I thought." His words dissolved into sobs. I watched him. Not with hatred. Not with satisfaction. But with an understanding I never thought I would feel. This was the consequence of his own choices. "Ariana, you were the only person who ever cared about me," he cried. "You were good to me. Loyal. I didn't see it then. I was blind. I was stupid." He reached out as if wanting to touch my arm, but I stepped back again. His hand dropped instantly, as though my refusal physically hurt him. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "For everything, for the slap, for the things I said, for calling you names, for treating you like you were nothing. You weren't nothing. You were." He broke down again, covering his face. The man who had once shouted at me in public now couldn't even lift his eyes to meet mine. "Please, Ariana," he said, falling to his knees right on my doorstep. "Give me another chance. I swear I'll change. I'll do anything. I just can't live like this anymore. I need you." His tears hit the concrete. His voice trembled so violently it almost disappeared. People from nearby apartments slowed down, watching quietly, whispering, recognizing the drama unfolding. Once, this would have humiliated me. But now? I wasn't the broken woman standing speechless inside a mall. I was different. Rebuilt. Stronger. I let him cry. I let him speak. I let him pour out every regret he had stored inside himself. And then, when he finally lifted his head, waiting for forgiveness, I exhaled slowly and spoke the words I had carried for a very long time. "Marcus," I said gently, "you are here today because the people you chose over me destroyed you." He blinked rapidly, tears clinging to his lashes. "But that is not my responsibility to fix." He shook his head desperately. "No, no, please, Ariana. I can be better. I know I can. I'll never hurt you again. I'll prove it, just don't leave me like this. I felt no hatred, no desire for revenge. Just clarity. The kind that comes when you finally understand your worth. You already left me, I said softly. You left me long before Vanessa. You left me when you stopped respecting me. When you called me names. When you slapped me in public. He winced, as if the memory physically burned him. Forgive me, he begged. Please. Please. I shook my head slowly. I do forgive you, I said. His eyes widened with hope. But forgiveness, I continued, does not mean returning to the person who broke me. The hope in his eyes shattered instantly. I'm building a new life now, a life with dignity, with family, with love. A life where I am valued. You don't belong in that life. No, he whispered. Ariana, please, please don't say that. But it was the truth. And truth, once spoken, becomes irreversible. I wish you healing, I said softly. But I will not be your second choice. Not now. Not ever. And with that, I closed the door. Slowly. Firmly. Completely. For a moment, I stood behind it, listening to his muffled sobs fade into the hallway. He waited. He pleaded. He knocked one last time. But I didn't open it. Because the woman he once slapped in front of strangers was no longer standing on the other side. Later that night, a neighbor told me Marcus eventually walked away, shoulders hunched, head down, carrying nothing but the weight of his own decisions. I didn't feel victory. I didn't feel guilt. I simply felt free. Closing that door wasn't cruel. It was necessary. It was healing. It was the final step in reclaiming my self-respect. I had chosen myself, finally, unapologetically. And that choice would define the rest of my life. The morning I decided to file for divorce was strangely calm. No trembling hands. No racing heartbeat. No doubt whispering in my ear. Just clarity. For years, I had lived inside a marriage that slowly poisoned me, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. But now, sitting at the breakfast table with a cup of warm tea in my hands and sunlight spilling across the room my father had rebuilt for me, I finally understood something. A divorce wasn't the end of my life. It was the beginning of my freedom. My father, Robert Carter, sat across from me, reading through a folder of documents he had prepared. Even after all the years we spent apart, he could still read my expressions the way only a father can. He looked up. "You're ready?" he asked gently. I nodded. "I am." And for the first time, I truly meant it. We drove in silence, not out of discomfort, but out of strength. My father didn't push. He didn't lecture. He simply stayed beside me like a silent shield, something I desperately needed. The law office stood tall and sleek, its glass doors reflecting the morning light. As I stepped inside, I felt a strange mix of nervousness and empowerment. Years ago, I wouldn't have believed I could fight for myself. But today was different. A receptionist guided us to a private consultation room. Within minutes, my lawyer, attorney Grace Mitchell, walked in. Her presence was firm yet reassuring. Someone who knew exactly how to fight, and more importantly, how to win. She sat down, folded her hands on the table, and smiled softly. "Ariana, I read everything you sent last night. I'm sorry you went through all of this. But legally, you are in a very strong position." Her confidence felt like oxygen. For the next hour, I told Attorney Grace every detail. Marcus's humiliation. The financial neglect. The public slap in the mall. The emotional abuse. The abandonment. Everything. She took notes quickly, her pen moving with precision. When I finished, she looked directly into my eyes. You are filing for divorce based on emotional cruelty, public humiliation, and abandonment, she said firmly. These are strong grounds in this state. And given everything he did, you have every legal right to walk away clean. Clean. That word meant more than I expected. I exhaled slowly, as though letting years of trapped air leave my lungs. Grace placed a thick stack of papers in front of me. These are the divorce filing documents. Once you sign them, Marcus will be legally notified. The court hearing will be scheduled within a few weeks. The papers felt heavier than they looked. They contained my past. Every broken promise, every tear, every insult Marcus ever threw at me. But they also contained my future. I picked up the pen. My father placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. "You're doing the right thing," he whispered. And with one long, steady motion, I signed. The moment my signature hit the page, I felt something shift inside me. A door closing. A chain breaking. A weight lifting. I wasn't Marcus's wife anymore, not emotionally and soon not legally. I was Ariana again. Whole. Independent. Unafraid. Grace explained every step of what would happen next. Marcus would be served official papers. He would have a limited time to respond. A judge would review the case. There would be a hearing. I might need to testify. He might contest it, or he might not. But Grace wasn't worried. A man who has lost everything rarely has the energy to fight a battle he knows he'll lose, she said calmly. She wasn't judging him. She was stating a fact. And she was right. After everything Vanessa did to him and everything he did to himself, Marcus had nothing left. Not dignity, not pride, not even a stable home. Still, the idea of facing him in court made my stomach twist. But Grace reassured me. You won't face him alone. I'll be right beside you. And so will your father. I looked at my dad, who nodded with quiet confidence. For the first time in years, I felt protected. Leaving the law office, the crisp air hit my face. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, terrifying and liberating at the same time. My father walked beside me, hands in his coat pockets, silently matching my steps. Ariana, he said after a few moments, divorce is not a failure. Staying with someone who doesn't respect you, that would have been the real failure. His words sank deep into me. He was right. Marcus didn't just fail as a husband, he failed as a human being. And I had spent years shrinking myself to survive him. But no more. Later that evening, Grace called. It's done. Marcus has been officially served. I closed my eyes and let the reality wash over me. Marcus knew now. He knew it was over. Not emotionally, not symbolically, but legally. There was no coming back. No second chance. No final plea. I had shut the door on him emotionally in step 7. Now the law was closing it forever. As night settled, my father and I sat on the balcony, the sky glowing softly above us. I felt lighter, calmer, more grounded than I had in years. Filing for divorce wasn't just a legal act. It was a declaration. A declaration that I loved myself more than the pain he caused me. A declaration that abuse would never be tolerated again. A declaration that my life was mine, and mine alone, to rebuild. I'm proud of you, Dad said quietly. I leaned my head against his shoulder, knowing deep within me that this step, this decision, this moment, would shape the woman I was becoming. A woman who walked away from pain. A woman who chose dignity. A woman who finally reclaimed her freedom. The morning of the final hearing arrived with a heaviness I could feel in my bones. I woke before my alarm, not out of anxiety, but out of anticipation. Today wasn't just a court date. It was the end of a long chapter, a door that needed to be shut so I could finally breathe without the weight of someone else's cruelty on my chest. I dressed carefully, choosing a simple, elegant navy blue dress. Nothing dramatic, nothing flashy, but strong enough to remind me who I had become. My father waited downstairs, his presence steady as always. "Ready?" he asked softly. I nodded. More than ready. We drove to the courthouse in silence, but it wasn't the hollow silence of fear. It was the silence of resolve, a quiet strength humming underneath my ribs. The courthouse hallway was colder than I expected, its fluorescent lights casting long reflections on the polished floors. Attorney Grace Mitchell greeted us outside courtroom 3B, her briefcase in one hand, her expression composed and confident. "Today will be straightforward," she assured me. "Tell the truth. Tell your story. I'll handle the rest." I inhaled deeply as the courtroom doors opened. And then I saw him. Marcus sat at the defendant's table, shoulders slumped, eyes hollow. He looked smaller than I remembered, like life had chipped away at him piece by piece until nothing recognizable remained. His suit was wrinkled, his hair messy, and from the dark circles under his eyes, it was obvious he hadn't slept. For a moment, I wondered if he even recognized himself. When his eyes lifted and met mine, guilt flashed across his face. Quick, sharp, undeniable. He looked away immediately. Good. He should. I took my seat beside Grace. My heart wasn't racing. My hands weren't trembling. I belonged here. This was my fight. Judge Thompson entered moments later, a stern yet fair presence behind the bench. Everyone rose, then sat. The hearing began. Marcus was called first. When he walked to the witness stand, his legs wobbled slightly. He avoided looking at me, focusing only on the microphone as if it could hide him from the truth. "Mr. Reed," the judge said, "do you acknowledge the claims made against you by your wife?" Marcus swallowed hard. I made mistakes. Mistakes. The word almost made me laugh. Calling his actions mistakes was like calling a hurricane a drizzle. Grace leaned in and whispered, "Let him talk. He's sinking his own ship." Marcus continued, voice shaky. "I wasn't a good husband. I said things I shouldn't have. I hurt her." Judge Thompson eyed him sharply. "Did you physically strike your wife in a public place?" Marcus froze. Shame washed over his face, red, blotchy, undeniable. "Yes." "Did you abandon her in a shopping mall while you met another woman?" "Yes." "Did you call her demeaning names, including referring to her as poor?" His voice cracked. "Yes, Your Honor." Each admission was a stone, heavy, humiliating, and sinking him deeper into the consequences of his own actions. Grace scribbled notes calmly. I sat still, watching the man who once tried to break me now crumble under the truth. When my name was called, I stood with a steadiness that surprised even me. I walked to the witness stand, placed my hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. The microphone felt cool beneath my fingers, but my voice was warm, steady, unshaken. Grace began gently. "Ariana, can you describe the events leading up to this divorce?" I told everything. Not with tears. Not with trembling. But with clarity. The emotional abuse. The insults. The humiliation in the mall. The slap that burned more emotionally than physically. Being left alone while he walked arm in arm with another woman. The courtroom was silent as I spoke, each word hanging in the air like undeniable evidence. At one point, I saw Marcus lower his head into his hands. Good. Let him feel the weight of what he did. Grace's final question was soft, but powerful. "Ariana, why do you want this divorce finalized today?" I breathed deeply. "Because I deserve a life where I am respected. Where I am safe. Where I am valued. Marcus took those things from me. I refuse to let him take any more." Even the judge's eyes softened. Judge Thompson reviewed the documents, the testimonies, the evidence. Then he looked at Marcus, firm, disappointed. "Mr. Reed, your behavior demonstrates a pattern of emotional cruelty, public humiliation, and abandonment. This court finds in favor of the petitioner." My heart pounded, not from fear but from relief. Then the words I had been waiting for. "The marriage between Ariana Carter and Marcus Reed is hereby dissolved, effective immediately. Full divorce granted." A breath escaped me, long, deep, freeing. I wasn't a wife anymore. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was me. Marcus lifted his face, tears streaming silently. The realization hit him visibly. There was no going back. Not now. Not ever. But I didn't feel sorry. I felt liberated. As the judge dismissed the court, Grace squeezed my hand. "You did incredibly well," she whispered. My father wrapped me in a hug right outside the courtroom doors. "I'm proud of you," he said quietly. For a moment, I closed my eyes and let the words wash over me. Proud. He was proud. And I was proud of myself. Leaving that courthouse, the air felt different. Lighter, sharper, alive. No chain on my heart. No weight on my shoulders. No fear in my steps. For the first time in my entire life, I stood completely, undeniably free. The morning after the divorce was finalized, I woke up to a quiet I had never felt before. Not the silence of fear, not the stillness of sadness. This time it was peace. A peace that wrapped itself around me like a warm blanket, one I didn't realize I had been yearning for all these years. For the first time, I didn't wake up thinking about what Marcus would say, or how Marcus would react, or whether I'd be walking on eggshells around his unpredictable moods. For the first time, the air in my room felt like it belonged to me. I stretched, stepped out of bed, and looked at myself in the mirror. I didn't see a survivor. I didn't see a victim. I saw a woman rebuilding herself, piece by piece, day by day, choice by choice. I saw Ariana Carter, a woman who had walked through fire and didn't burn. A woman who had learned how to rise. My father was already in the kitchen when I walked downstairs, humming quietly as he prepared breakfast. Something he insisted on doing even though he knew I was perfectly capable. When he turned and saw me, his smile widened. "Morning, sweetheart," he said gently. "How are you feeling?" I paused, listening to my own heartbeat. "Free," I said. And he nodded as though he had been waiting years to hear that word from me. We ate together, not saying much, but every moment felt meaningful. We had lost so many years, but now we were building something new, slowly, intentionally, beautifully. For the first time in a long time, I felt like a daughter again. In the weeks that followed, I began rediscovering myself. I took long drives with no destination, windows down, music loud, hair dancing in the wind. I visited bookstores, filled carts with novels I never had time to read during my marriage. I cooked for fun, not obligation. I wore clothes Marcus once called too bright, too bold, or too expressive. Now I wore whatever made me feel alive. But the most important rediscovery was internal. I remembered who I was before the pain. I remembered the girl who once dreamed big. The woman who wanted to build something of her own. The soul that refused to be dimmed by someone else's darkness. With my father's help and guidance, I restarted my business, this time on my own terms. Not under anyone's shadow. Not with anyone's validation. Just me, my ambition, my vision. And it flourished. Clients loved the authenticity I put into my work. They loved my confidence, my insight, my dedication. It turned out that the strength I thought Marcus had taken from me had only been hiding, waiting for the right moment to rise again. That moment was now. Healing didn't happen overnight. Some days, the memories felt heavy. Some nights, I questioned how I allowed myself to endure so much for so long. But every time doubt tried to pull me backward, my father reminded me gently. You didn't stay because you were weak. You stayed because you were hopeful. And hope is never something to be ashamed of. His words healed parts of me I didn't even know were still wounded. I started therapy, invested time in self-care, and created boundaries. Healthy, protective boundaries I had never allowed myself before. I learned to forgive myself. I learned to trust myself. I learned to love myself. Not because someone else validated me, but because I finally understood my worth. The bond between my father and me deepened with each passing day. We took evening walks together. We talked about life, regrets, dreams, and second chances. Sometimes he apologized for the years we lost, but I always told him the same thing. I'm just grateful you came back. That's all that matters. He supported my business, encouraged my independence, and showed me what healthy love truly looks like: steady, kind, patient, and unconditional. It felt like a chapter one never knew I needed. A chapter where I wasn't alone. A chapter where someone stood beside me without expecting anything in return. A chapter where I was finally seen. Months passed, and with them, the final remnants of my old life faded away. I grew into someone stronger than I ever imagined. A woman unafraid to say no. A woman who could stand her ground. A woman who knew she deserved respect. A woman Marcus could never break again. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. My business expanded. My financial independence strengthened. My emotional walls became healthy boundaries instead of survival mechanisms. Slowly, the world began to feel safe again. One evening, as my father and I watched the sunset from our backyard, he turned to me with the same warmth he once had when I was a child. I'm proud of the woman you've become, he said softly. Tears pricked at my eyes, not from sadness but from gratitude. For so long, I had been defined by what broke me. Now, I was defined by what I rebuilt. And I rebuilt everything. My life. My identity. My dreams. My self-worth. The woman sitting there that evening wasn't the same woman who had walked out of that mall broken and humiliated. She was reborn. Reclaimed. Radiant. As I close this chapter, I know one thing with absolute certainty. My story didn't end with betrayal. It began with freedom. I may have lost pieces of myself along the way, but I gained something far greater. A life I built with my own hands. A purpose I created with my own strength. A future I chose with my own voice. This isn't the end. This is my beginning. When I look back at everything I survived, one truth becomes clearer than anything else. Pain didn't end me, it shaped me. The betrayal, the humiliation, the loneliness. They were chapters, not my whole story. Walking out of that courthouse wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the beginning of my life. A life where I finally chose myself. A life where I stopped apologizing for wanting respect. A life where I understood that healing is not about forgetting the past, but about refusing to live in it. My father's return reminded me of the strength I thought I had lost. My rebuilding reminded me of the courage I never knew I had. And my freedom reminded me that no one, not even the person I once loved, could decide my worth. Today, I stand on my own terms, whole, confident, and unafraid of tomorrow. Because now I know. My husband broke me, but I rebuilt myself. And my freedom began with my signature.